All right, so the last step is going to be to deploy the application and go online, and I'm going to be using Heroku. So the first thing that I'm going to do is fix any errors that may exist with my build. Now what happens is, since I'm running a server, there may be some errors when I go into production that you wouldn't catch in development mode, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to just cancel out the ng-serve, the development server, and I'm going to run, make sure you're inside the Angular 2 folder. For this application it was client, and run ng-build --prod for production. Alright, now if you were following the application exactly as I was, you'll probably run into some errors here. And so what you'll want to do is, these are basically just repeating the errors for all the form fields that in my components. They're just repetitive errors. And there's really only 2 errors here actually. And so once you build out that production build, you want to go through your errors and kind of troubleshoot and debug and find out what went wrong. So the first thing that I'm going to address is the authentication service. So if you go into the Angular 2 side, into source, app, components, and then the nav bar, if you open up the HTML, you'll notice that to hide the links for users that are logged in and for users that are not logged in, I use the authentication service directly in the HTML like this, right? Which was an imported service. And so since I'm using that from the navbar component.ts file, what you have to do is change it to public in order to access it in the HTML like that. So I'll just change this to public. And then going back to the console here, the other error that I have is on the forms. So if you go into, let's see, where all the pages where I have forms, so like the login, you'll see here I assigned form group to form, but I actually don't want to do that. I'm just going to leave it at form, and I'm going to do that with register as well. Alright, and then last I'm going to go back into my home component. And if you go over to the HTML, I did the same thing with auth service. So I'll just have to go into the component.ts file inside the class file and change this to public. Right, and that's it. So before I go ahead and build that out, what I want to do is change a few things here. And if you go into the root directory inside the package.json, sorry, not the package.json, the index.js file, what I want to do is, instead of listening to port 8080, with Heroku and certain other platforms, what you want to do is allow the platform to set a port from the environment, from the platform, right? So you want to give it an option rather than having this one, because it's not going to work. So what I'll do is up here I'll just create a new const and name it port, and it'll be process.environment.port or 8080, and then we can change this to port, and then instead of that I'll concatenate it right here. Alright, and then inside of my package.json, I'm going to add another script here, and it's going to be the building script, so users can build your application if they try to install it or download it from GitHub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run, I'm going to change directory into the client folder, and I'm going to run ng-build and --prod. After that, go right back out into the root directory and run node index.js. Alright, and there we go. You see there it compiled everything, and then it ran our server. So you can just test this really quick. So go to the 8080 and you'll see your application is running there. So it used that 8080 because we don't have an environment port set up here. So it's just going to default to that 8080. All right, so the next thing that I want to show you is if you go over to the GitHub page. So whenever you build this, I'll show you really quick. Inside the client folder, you'll see there's a new folder called dist. And so that's where your production application lies, right? But I'll show you that if you click on, like if you just move the cursor somewhere else, specifically if you're using Atom, some of the other code editors don't do this, but you'll see that it's grayed out compared to like this folder or some of the other folders, right? And the reason for that is because it's configured so that your build and your node modules don't get uploaded to GitHub, which is exactly what you want. You don't want to submit your production and your packages here, right? Because it's just going to make your application larger on GitHub, and it's going to take up more space, right? So the way you want it is you want the bare bones. Users will download it, install the modules, and then build your production. So if you go into client, you'll see that even if you built that out and uploaded it to GitHub, it's not going to include it, right? No matter what you do, it's not going to include it, even though it actually does exist in a folder. And that's what we want, okay? But you run into some problems when you're using Heroku, because Heroku is going to run off of Git. So if this, like for example, this exact folder structure is what's going to go into Heroku. So Heroku is going to try to run this. I'll show you the file that we have here. It's basically going to try to access, and maybe I'll just show you in the code editor so it'll look easier, bigger. It's going to try to run client dist index file, right? It's going to try to access that, but it's not going to find it because even though it exists here in this project, once you upload it to Git, it's not going to exist and it won't find it. Okay, so that's the first issue that you're going to run into with Heroku. The second one is Angular has its own dependencies, right? So it has its own package.json file. So because the backend is outside of that structure, none of these dependencies are going to get installed, right? So ng build won't work, and anything else that you would need in Angular 2 won't work because it's not going to be installed. The only one that's going to get installed is this main package.json file here, okay? Now, there are a few different ways that you can do this. For example, you can add something to your scripts to tell Heroku to go into the client folder, install these dependencies, and then try to run your commands, right? So that's going to take a little bit of work, and it's a little bit tedious, honestly, and it's not even really necessary. An easier way to do it is just take your production folder and don't use the dist default, right? The distribution folder here. Don't use that. Instead, create one outside of the Angular 2 client, and it'll be untouched. It'll be static. So I'll show you how to do that. Inside of client folder, you go to the Angular-CLI, and right here is the out directory, and you just want to change that. So I'll say I'll back out of the client folder, and then I'll just name it public. And so now I just want to build that and make sure that it works. So, right, then I'm just going to go back to my code editor, and you'll see now that there is a public folder here, but it's not grayed out like the other folder, so it's static. If we upload this to Git right now, it will get included in the repository. So you want to make sure this is deleted before you ever upload this to Git, otherwise you'll include your production. Additionally, I'm going to go in and manually delete this dist folder because we're not going to need it anymore. Alright, so, but like I said, make sure you delete that before you upload it to Git. You may also want to delete your node modules and whatever dependencies you don't need. And additionally, you want to go into the index.js file and change this because we had it mapped to the dist folder. So now we just need to change that. So we'll just say /public, and then for here, /public/index.html. And then I'm just going to test that to make sure that I did it correctly. So I'll just go over here and try to access. Oh, actually I have to restart this this server, so I'll just run node index.js and then I'll just give that a refresh. Alright, and so we got that working. So now we're ready to go ahead and go live on Heroku. So what you'll need to do, actually there's one last step I just remembered. If you remember back in our database configuration, we are using the local MongoDB database, right? So you're not going to be able to use that if you upload to Heroku. The app will not work. So what you need to do is find hosting online, create some kind of option for you to host MongoDB. So I'm going to show you a really easy one. There's a lot of them out there, like Amazon Web Services or whatever. But I'll just show you MLab. MLab is a really fast way to get started. It's a database as a service, and it is free up to a certain amount of data. But the sandbox, which is basically like the demo, provides a lot of usage, so you can get a lot out of it. So I'll just sign up for an account here really quick. I'll say mean Angular 2. Right, and then afterward you will have to go to your email and click on that activation link. Right, so then after that, what you want to do is up here click create new deployment. And so these are different options that you have. You can go through Google Cloud, Amazon, or Microsoft. And so this sandbox gives you up to 0.5 gigs, which is pretty decent actually. And I'm just going to use that. So click down here, continue, and just pick your region, name it, and I'll say Angular 2 app. And then I'll leave all that, hit submit. All right, so after that, what you need to do is go inside of your database and create a new user, otherwise you won't be able to access it. So just click right here, users, click add database user, and I'll just name mine afterwards, you'll see two links up here at the top, and so the bottom one is the one that you want to use in our application. So right here you want to replace this in. So what I like to do is just create a new one and maybe put next to it maybe production, and then just coming out the top one. And actually you want to put this in tax, okay? And so right here where it says database user, you want to replace that with whatever you created, which mine is Patel. So, and then for the password, you want to replace it with whatever password you assign to that user. Okay, don't forget to add the comma on the end there. And then for database name, I'll just copy it from here. And this really isn't going to matter too much anyway, because we're not going to be displaying that. So I'll hit save on that. And normally, it's usually a good idea to just test that locally before you deploy and just make sure that it works. And actually, I can do that really fast. It's not going to take too long. Okay, you just want to make sure that you connect there. So once you do that, and then you're good to go, and we can begin to deploy. So the first thing that you want to do is head over to Heroku and sign up for an account, and then you want to download their CLI. And basically what that does is it allows you to access Heroku through the command line tool. And so after you install it, you just want to make sure that it's connected to your terminal by typing in Heroku version, and you should get the version there. So going back, I'm going to open up a new browser and go to Heroku Getting Started. And they have a really simple setups for depending on what type of application you're trying to deploy. So obviously we're going to do Node.js. And then you want to just skip to the deploy the app part. And so you want to follow all these steps. So let's go ahead and run Heroku create. And I'd recommend before doing that, just go git status, and you'll see that there's some files that need to be committed before continuing, right? And remember, like I was saying before, you don't want to push this to the actual your actual GitHub page, just to the Heroku. So what you'll do is git add all, and then afterwards git commit, and I'll just name this deployment. Okay. Afterwards, you want to run Heroku create. Now, there are a few different options. You could specifically name the app if you want to. Otherwise, what it's going to do is generate that name for you. And you can actually run Heroku open to open the application, or you can just go to it manually. I'll just hit refresh here, and you should see the new app. And I believe it was this one. And so if you just hit open app up here, you'll just get this welcome page right here. So now we're ready to, basically what this does, I'll show you. It creates a Git repository for Heroku called Heroku Git. And what you need to do is commit it to this Git instead, and that's where your application will lie. So let's go ahead and do that. And going back to the Get Started, they show you how to do it here. It's really simple. All you need to do is just type in git push Heroku master. And so depending on your application, sometimes this part can get tricky because you may get errors if you did something wrong, and sometimes the errors are not that easy to read, but hopefully everything goes okay. But once that's done, what you want to do, and also I wanted to show you, if you ever need to do some debugging and maybe you're not quite sure why it's not working, you want to hit up here more, and you have these logs, and you can also run a console here on Heroku and try to run some commands and see what you get. And if you hit the view logs here, it basically logs everything that's going on in your application, and you'll get error messages here sometimes that might be helpful. Alright, once that's done, you just want to scan through, make sure no errors. And like I said, you can run Heroku open, or if you already have it open, you can just run open app. Right, and so here's the application, and you also want to log in, make sure that your database is connected. Oh, actually, I never created a user because we created a new database. So you just want to go ahead and create a new one. Okay, now you're going to see an error here, and I didn't realize it until I did this just now, that I forgot to change something. And so going back to the project, if you go over to the client, and you go to source, and then app services, all service. Now all of our calls to the API are using this URL, but we're not going to be using that once we go onto Heroku. So I just kind of forgot to do that. And so then you just want to run npm run build to build that out again. And actually, I just realized, I don't know why I have the server running on that script. It shouldn't be set up like that. Wrong file. Let's see here. Yeah, so you actually want to get rid of this last part here. I don't know why I did that. Getting ahead of myself there. So I'm going to just get rid of that. And then I'll just go ahead and build this now. Alright, then afterwards you just want to go ahead and add everything to the repository again. And same as before, you just want to make sure no errors, and then I'll just go back and hit refresh on this, and now this should work. All right, there we go. And so the reason why I knew it wasn't working is because these forms are actually making a call to the API, and then I noticed it wasn't working, and then it just reminded me why. So I'll go ahead and just register my user, and then I will try to log in to make sure it works. Oops. There we go. All right, and that's it. And this will be empty now because you have a new database, and you kind of just want to test out all your functions and just make sure everything works. All right, and that's it. So the next thing you'll notice here, the URL is tagged with this herokuapp.com thing, right? So you obviously want to deploy it to your own domain. And so I'm going to be using Google domain. I think they're really easy to set up with, and they have a lot of really cool tools. So if you go just domains.google, you can just purchase your own domain. It's pretty cheap too. So you want to search for it there. It's going to require you to log in and basically search for that domain. And I'm just going to use one that I already have. So, but once you're logged in, you'll be on this screen, which shows all your domains. And what you want to do is take the URL of that application and copy it. And then you want to go back over to the settings of your Heroku app. And right down here where it says add domain, you want to click that and add it there. So depending on whatever domain you signed up for. All right, and then you'll see that populate right here and right here. And so then you want to go back and actually copy the one from Heroku. So just go back over to your app and copy this minus the blog part, delete that, and get rid of this window. And so you want to go back to your Google domains and go to manage domains and click configure DNS, and scroll down to the very bottom here. And so then at the bottom here, you want to click on this first field and type in www and change this to CNAME, and then paste your domain here. And you just want to get rid of this first part, so just the domain, and then hit add. And then up here you also want to add a subdomain. So what you type is this little symbol right there, and then you want to type in the full address to your site. And that'll make sure that anyone types in this yeomanrate.com or just the domain directly will be forwarded to the full. So I'm just going to go ahead and test this out really quick. And you want to try this either with www and without it. You want to make sure that you're getting that forward and that it works.